Why, when we go to the zoo, are there big signs everywhere saying "Do not feed the animals"? I think one of the reasons is because the foods that we're likely to feed the animals are actually toxic for the animals, and if they're toxic for the animals, they're probably toxic for us too, right? Hi, welcome to another Thursday live stream here. So I was in the zoo this morning doing some shooting with some members of my team. It was a lot of fun. Just going to the zoo to do anything is a lot of fun. You see the animals, see what they're up to, and talk with some of the caretakers if you can. All really, really good stuff. But one of the things that just crossed my mind thinking about that whole event. So I took a photo of myself next to this "Do not feed the animals" kind of sign, and I was talking about how probably if it's not good for the animals, it's not good for us either because we are animals, right? And that is very true. But it's also true. Like I just want to cut through some of the confusion around, especially the seed oil nonsense, because there are people who are breaking seed oils into their components, right? This is sort of a this is the omega 6 omega 3 debate. Is linoleic acid, is dietary linoleic acid bad? Is linoleic acid in the blood bad? Is alpha linolenic acid bad? Is arachidonic acid bad? Like there are these questions that don't have clear answers because the answer is like it's neither bad nor good. There's a range. There's an optimized range, or there's a particular range for any individual. And what your range is, I don't know. I mean, someone's natural omega 6 to 3 ratio may be 10 to 1, someone's maybe 20 to 1, someone's maybe 1 to 1. Like I don't necessarily believe all this. The data that we have saying that the optimal ratio is 3 to 1 or less. I'm not so convinced by the existing data. But that said, what I can say that I'm completely convinced by is just the first principles. There are foods that were not part of our diet 100 years ago or 200 years ago or even 500 years ago. So I'm not going back. For some of our discussions, we go back 12,000 years to the beginning of the what's called the Neolithic Age, the Neolithic revolutions, and so on. You don't even have to go that far, right? Seed oils are one of those things that only enter the food supply really in the late 19th, early 20th century, and that coincides with a number of things going bad. Now, what the seed oil defender would say, and there are many seed oil defenders out there, I know some of you are probably watching this. What the seed oil defenders say is that, yes, Amir, that's true, but remember there are a lot of other things that happen at that time, which is also true. People start wearing shoes. People, electric lights become a thing. Suddenly, we're exposed to these electromagnetic frequencies. That's also true. We start living more indoors, because our technology advances and we're able to control our environment more. Heating systems get better, etc. All that is true, but I'm just saying, like from a first principles point of view, from a sort of the idea that of all of those things, diet is probably going to be the most powerful. So from a first principles point of view, what should we be eating foods that didn't exist 100 years ago, 200 years ago? And my answer to that is neither yes nor no. You have to decide for yourself. But my suggestion would be, if you're not in optimal health, then taking those foods out of the diet that's like a no-brainer, right? It's just a complete no-brainer. So the foods and other foods too. Like you're looking at things like popcorn and so on. Not that I have anything against popcorn per se, but when we look at how corn was used in Aztec society and some of these other societies, yes, it was sacred and it was part of the culture in certain ways, but it was also a tool of control, right? It was also used by the ruling class to sort of provide cheap grains to everyone else, right? In the same way that oats weren't really a human food until very recently, and but they were used, or different kinds of gruel, if you want to think about it that way. Porridge was used to basically feed enslaved people. I was doing some research the other day and I came across that broccoli was also used to feed enslaved people, right? Broccoli, which everyone considers a health food these days. So, I mean, did those enslaved people know that they were being fed a health food? I mean, I kind of doubt it, right? And did the people who were enslaving them want to feed them a health food? Again, I kind of doubt it, right? So back to basics. Get rid of the sources of fat that are really not optimal. Like I don't see any reason to keep it in the diet, right? And people talk to me about cost, and sometimes people have to eat the cheap stuff. Yeah, maybe, but I'm convinced that most of us could be eating a lot higher quality food if we just ate less of it, right? In other words, if we ate less often. Sometimes you're hungry, you're peckish, you want a snack at 11 o'clock or whatever, so you go to McDonald's. All right, fine. But what if you had had a proper breakfast of 6 eggs or 8 eggs plus some whatever you eat, bacon, egg, cheese, some other protein source as well. 6 eggs plus a protein source plus an animal protein source. I eat lamb with my eggs usually, maybe beef. So if you had done that at 7, 8 o'clock, whenever you had your breakfast, would you be hungry at 11? And my answer to that is absolutely no. You would not be hungry at 11 if you were serious about that, right? So again, from a first principles point of view, this is just not stuff that makes sense. Now, I'm happy to enter into debates about linoleic acid, alpha linoleic acid, arachidonic acid, omega 3s, DHA, EPA. Like, I know all that technical literature backwards and forwards, but it doesn't help anyone. What I'm interested in helping you, just make a first principles decision. If it's not meat, fish, or eggs, and if it's not an oil source that has been traditionally used for 100 years or more, then just stay away from it, right? Simple, simple, simple stuff. Now, in terms of if you want to get a little bit more technical, what do I think is going on with those things? Those industrialized seed oils go through a process. And so therefore, listen, if it's showing up that, say, linoleic acid in the blood, for example, is associated with worse outcomes, or arachidonic acid in the blood is associated with worse outcomes, is that because of the canola oil? Or is it because of the process is it that that's a marker for how much oxidized oils you're intaking? In other words, the process that those oils have to go through, those oils have to be deodorized, colorized, like all this. I think it's a 12-step process. You can go on the internet and say, how is canola oil made? It's not that you just press the seeds and you get something out. What you get when you press the seeds is a foul-smelling and somewhat nauseous liquid. It has to be heated up. It has to be disinfected. It has to be like deodorized. All of these processes have to come in. And during that process, the stability of the omega-6 fats, or whatever fats are in there, because everything's a mix, the stability of the fats basically goes to hell. It's not stable. It oxidizes. And when things oxidize in your body, it's bad. When things oxidize outside your body, that is even worse, right? So some of the data is showing that, say, arachidonic acid being bad. Not sure, but it's entirely possible that arachidonic acid is just a marker for how much oxidized seed oil this person is taking in. And oxidized seed oil is definitely bad, right? So very obvious statements here. Thanks to those of you who are leaving comments. Let me see if this one looks interesting. When I was a child, every time I passed along a kiosk where foods were fried using seed oils, I got nausea and headache just by the smell of fried seed oils. No one should tell me that it's healthy. I mean, that's absolutely, absolutely correct, right? So there are definitely some people, in fact, I had a client like this, where someone would open a tin of fish in oil, and he would get an allergic reaction to it. Now, he wasn't necessarily reactive to the fish, because he could have fish that wasn't in oil. He could eat that himself and not have a reaction. But the problem was the oils in there were triggering, and for him it was really bad. It was migraines, it was asthma. He had to be taken out of school. This was a high schooler, right? High school kid. So in some cases it can be really, really, really bad. So, but that's, I mean, I guess the defendant, we should always try and steel man our opponent's arguments. And I guess the opponent would say, look, someone could have a peanut allergy, someone can be allergic to anything. That is true. But what we see with this is it's not just the allergies, it is the slow buildup of a disease process. Because at the end of the day, my friends, we are all made up of fat. There's a lipid bilayer in our cells, in all of our cells, that keeps us young, healthy, flexible, whatever the good things are. That it's really because of the lipids that we are doing that in the skin, in every cell membrane. And the lipid, whatever that is, like, we don't want those things made up of oxidized junk, right? We want it made up of traditional human foods, I think, right? We don't produce our own fat. I mean, you can kind of produce your own fat, but it's very complicated. You need a starting point, right? The starting point will be the foods that you eat. And look, man, keep it super simple. Meat, fish, eggs, maybe some dairy if you tolerate it. Most people tolerate butter and ghee, so I would definitely say butter and ghee are fantastic sources. And if you're concerned about omega-3, and there is some reason to think that maybe it is a good idea to be concerned about omega-3, try and find a very good source of fish oil, or some kind of, I was actually taking desiccated mussel powder for a little while, but some kind of like regular consumption of fish seems to be the best way to get your DHA and EPA. I don't think that the vegetarian options, which are made of algae or algae, however you pronounce that word, I don't think they are the same. I don't think they have the same effect. Again, if you're a vegan, welcome to my channel. Do check out some of the content on my own vegan journey and how I decided that was really not a human appropriate diet. But if you're open to trying some fish oil, if you're open to trying some fatty fish, you're gonna have to eat a lot of fatty fish to really have an impact. But I think supplementing with fish oil, the more I'm looking at the studies, the more I'm thinking probably a good thing, even for those of us who are eating in a hypercarnivorous way, it's probably not a bad thing. The other alternative would be to eat the more of the brains, right? So the brains of lamb and beef and so on, especially, those are also very rich in omega-3 fatty acids, and it's a delicacy. And it depends where you are. They used to be really cheap. I think too many of us people who have been prioritizing organ meats have been showing up at the shops, and so now they're far more expensive than they used to be. But I remember it used to be practically free a couple of years ago. It depends where you live, right? Even now in Johannesburg, I know where to get it pretty cheap. So eating more brains, eating more fish, eating more, supplementing with fish oil. I think these are all good strategies in general. But the obvious thing is get the crap fats out of your diet. If you're eating somewhere, ask what oil they're frying your French fries in or whatever it is. I mean, French fries probably not a good idea in general. But if you're going to eat the French fries, the ones in tallow are going to be preferred in my book over the ones in sunflower oil. Even the ones in palm oil are going to be preferred over the ones in sunflower oil. So, some food for thought. Thanks for tuning in. Leave your comments below, and I will see you in the next one.